PhillyCAM's work is rooted in free speech and uplifting community voices. Both free speech and freedom of the press are in danger across the country. There's never been a more critical moment to understand what's at stake and to understand what we can do about it. This year, People Power Media Fest centers the conversation on censorship, focusing on telling counter-narratives and creating contributions for the future of media. By emphasizing the role of the public, community media can help preserve everyone's freedom of speech and expression.
Our Constitution's First Amendment gives us the power to shape our conversation, and community media puts microphones in the hands of everyday people. It's critical to include community, public, and independent media at the table for a true democratic media landscape.
PhillyCAM is a hub for media makers from diverse industries, backgrounds, and interests. As Philly folk, we pride ourselves on living up to that standard. We are journalists, filmmakers, and activists unafraid of asking tough questions in pursuit of truth.
You don't know from one minute to the next if you're reading something or if you're watching something, whether or not it is actually true. If we do all we can here at a place like PhillyCAM to combat misinformation, disinformation, and straight up lying, we've done our job.
El proceso de crear diferentes medios, cine, radio, televisión, nos impulsa a superar las barreras del idioma, la cultura y las creencias. Con acceso a recursos mediáticos, cualquier persona de la comunidad puede acercarse a PhillyCAM y crear una coalición natural en donde Real Talk pueda prosperar.
People Power Media Fest is where we can envision the future of media. It's an opportunity to reassess this moment together. By sharpening our storytelling skills and acknowledging our right to media independence, we can expand our impact and rediscover the truth.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Come on. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Gretchen Clausing. I'm the executive director of PhillyCAM. I see some new faces here, so I'll let you know that we're the nonprofit just down the street, and you will be visiting us in after this panel, that operates the city's public access television station, the low-power FM radio station, WPPM 106.5, and then also offers slews of classes and in media making, reporting, and youth media. So hopefully, really one of the ideas about People Power Media Fest was to kind of celebrate the work and of our members, but also be able to showcase what we're doing to people that might not be already in our community. So welcome. I'm really happy to have you here today. We have been doing People Power Media Fest. This is our 6th year, and it's taken all different kind of forms. We've had block parties and dance parties and other kinds of panels and workshops, and this year we just decided that we wanted to kind of focus on like our own little kind of conference. And so we've got a slew of things, both hands-on and discussion-based and panel-based, that'll be happening at PhillyCAM this afternoon. We crowdsourced the theme from amongst our members, and this theme of free speech, real talk was the overwhelming winner, I guess, in that poll. And, you know, back in the spring, we really had no idea kind of how quickly the world is changing and how kind of just the conversation around free speech, censorship, media consolidation, just all these things just started hitting us so quickly. But it's something that we in community media have known for many years, and that's why we protect these kind of platforms of public access television and community radio and just community reporting in general, because we know how important it is to have a diversity of opinions and not having it be controlled entirely by corporate interests. So we're really going to be digging into that in today's plenary discussion. So I don't want to steal the thunder of our wonderful panelists, but I do want to take an opportunity to thank a couple people. obviously our funders and our sponsors and our amazing community partners who are all participating in today's fest, either in the makerspace or as panelists or just kind of providing moral support. So I just want to thank all of them. I want to thank the folks here at WHYY. Definitely Lisa Wilk has helped us so much for us to be able to secure this space. We felt like it was really important that it, again, in this moment of public media being defunded, that we consider ourselves part of public media, and so that we could kind of join together, because this is really, I think, as the video sort of says, that this is an opportunity for us to kind of envision our future together. What is the kind of public media that we want? And I also want to thank the staff at PhillyCAM. They're incredible. You'll see all the stuff that they prepared for you just a few blocks away, but I definitely want to highlight all the work of Laura Deutsch, our education director, who has really kind of curated so many of these panels, and also big thanks to Annika Karen, who is our media center manager, who's kind of holding this all together. So without further ado, I'm gonna give a warm welcome to our fantastic moderator for today's panel, and that is Cherry Gregg here from WHYY. She's a journalist, she's an attorney, and she's a host of the flagship show here on WHYY Radio, Studio 2. So Cherry, come on up, and all the panelists too.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Good morning, People Power Media family. How y'all feeling this morning? Yeah, I'm drinking my coffee too. So we're all gonna kind of wake up, but that's the point of this plenary. Hopefully we'll set the stage for today. The focus here is media for the people, defending free speech together. Thank you so much to PhillyCAM for organizing this event and for having me here. WHYY is our absolute pleasure to provide this space for you. Now listen, I just wanna say the stakes could not be higher. Across this country, we see journalists under attack, artists silenced, social media platforms censored, and entire communities losing their local newsrooms. It's getting real out here. Free speech, that is the cornerstone of our democracy. It's being tested in ways that we haven't seen in decades. But as my grandmother used to say, pressure creates diamonds. And this is our moment to shine, to reimagine media, not as a weapon of the powerful, but as a tool of the people. Yes? Can I get some claps for that? I'm Cherry Gregg, as you heard. I'm a civil rights journalist, I'm a broadcaster, I'm a lawyer, co-host of WHYY's Studio 2, and I've spent my entire career amplifying voices often left out of the conversation, and today we're gonna explore how we together can protect those voices and make sure that they're heard. So we wanna use this opening plenary to set the tone for today. So our intention for the next hour is to connect the dots of the moment. What's at stake when speech is restricted or controlled? How community media and independent platforms serve as a lifeline for truth-telling. And we'll also talk about how we can build a more informed, connected, and empowered public, especially as technology and AI. Everybody nervous about that AI? Got a video floating around that maybe you didn't create, looks just like you though, right? How AI is reshaping the media landscape before our eyes. So we're gonna ask some hard questions about power, access, and the future of expression. And I hope and promise that by the end of this hour, you'll see that defending free speech isn't just about the First Amendment, it's about our very humanity. And so I wanna take a moment and I wanna introduce our panelists. And as I call each of your names, I hope that you will come and take a seat on the stage here so we can start our conversation. Our first panelist is Jasmine White. She's the dynamic board chair of the Alliance for Community Media, an organization dedicated to empowering communities through local media and ensuring that every voice has a platform. Can we give a warm round of applause for Jasmine, please? Hi, Jasmine. We also have Michael Cord. He's a powerhouse civil rights attorney, a columnist, producer, and host for WURD Radio, whose work stands at the intersection of law, history, and justice. Can we give Michael a round of applause? And last, of course, and not least, we have Vanessa Maria Graber, an award-winning bilingual journalist, educator, and community organizer who has built and led groundbreaking journalism collaboratives in New Jersey and in Philadelphia. Vanessa, come on up and have a seat. So welcome, everybody. How y'all feeling? It's Saturday
Excited.
morning. And we're talking about free speech and free expression. And so across the country, we are seeing free speech tested like never before. Journalists are threatened for truth-telling, artists are being silenced for political expression, and educators are facing bans for just teaching honest history. I mean, it's getting real. The very right to speak truth to power is on trial. So I want to sort of lay the foundation for this conversation by having each of you take a couple minutes and just explain the work that you do within the media ecosphere and how this moment is creating challenges to that work, especially when it comes to First Amendment and freedom of expression. And we'll go right down the line here, starting with you, Jasmine.
Okay, so as Cherry mentioned, I am the board chair for the Alliance for Community Media, which is a national organization that consists of the public education and government channels across the country. So we are seeing on a regular basis all of our stations and our members, they're facing a lot of threats when it comes to funding, but the reason the organization exists is to be able to support these organizations like PhillyCAM and my own, because I also work for Montgomery Community Media, which is the public access station in Montgomery County. It's a national resource so that we can talk about advocacy efforts, legislation, supporting boards, and just having really strong communities so that we can do this work without those threats. Unfortunately, the things that we're seeing today, I never thought that I would see in my lifetime. And I just remember reading books like 1984 in college and Fahrenheit 51 and thinking this could never happen, right? The idea about banning books and really just limiting people's ability to be free in not just speech, but thought, right? So the fact that you can't be comfortable in having a thought that goes against your government is a really scary place, and it's a place that I've never been, and it's a place that I never thought that I would be. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to provide whatever support we can as a national organization to support the work on the ground of so many organizations doing this work.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you. Back under the Reagan administration and the Bush 1 and 2 administration, I used to engage in hyperbole. I would call America a blatantly fascist state. But now it's not hyperbole. America right now is where Germany was shortly before Hitler took power. It's where Italy was shortly before Mussolini took power. It's where Spain was shortly before Francisco Franco. And that's no hyperbole. This is real. When Cherry said earlier that this is real, I couldn't say it any better. This is real. And it's important upon journalists to do something about it. Having said that, and Cherry and I always joke, I always tell people when speak for 30 seconds, it turns out to be 15 minutes, but I promise 30 seconds this time. I introduce myself to lawyers. I always say that I'm a part-time lawyer and a full-time activist. To you all, I'll say I'm a part-time journalist, but full-time agitator. And if you are a real journalist, you're also an agitator. Otherwise, you're wasting time. It's really important, and I can't impress upon you all enough, that journalists do what needs to be done. This is real. In law school, they taught us that the whole notion of the First Amendment was a protection against the government. But now, it's a protection against the government and corporations. It's the same thing. In the past, you would have to make an argument in court that, hey, the government did X, Y, and Z to suppress my free speech. Now, you can make a legitimate argument that it's the corporations. This is real, and I hope everybody here appreciates that and does something. We don't want people 10, 15, 20 years from now saying about America what I just said about Germany, what I just said about Spain, what I just said about Italy, but we're on the way unless you do your job.
Thank you. So Vanessa, talk about your work and how it sort of is presented with challenges in this moment.
Yeah, I originally got involved in the media justice movement when I was a graduate student back in 2003, and I joined the anti-war movement. And I attended mass mobilizations. We're talking 250,000, 500,000 people in New York and Washington. And there was a complete media blackout. And, you know, being the good researcher that I was like, why is the media blacking this out? Why, you know? And at the time, and, you know, this is going to age me a little bit, we had to develop our photos and wait for them to come back. So people did not believe me that this many people were assembled. And so, and even when I got those photos, you know, it really didn't do it justice. It's not like seeing stuff on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube nowadays, where you're like, okay, there was a million people out there. And so, Free Press held its first conference on media reform, I believe in December of 2003. So I traveled to Madison, Wisconsin. And that is where the media justice movement really began to become organized. People have always been fighting for access to the media, especially people of color. But I've been doing that work for more than 20 years. So in some ways, we've been preparing for this moment. Nevertheless, the rapid nature of our, you know, descent into fascism has surprised me. Because even though we read Project 2025 and at Free Press we were preparing for them to gut the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, to further consolidate the media, for the FCC to, you know, take away a lot of the media ownership rules and the caps on ownership. What has happened is really overwhelmed us, if I'm being honest. You know, Mondays at Free Press can be really intense because every week they are chipping away at our First Amendment rights. They are further consolidating the media, and there is an immense proliferation of disinformation, which is very, very difficult to combat. Especially when independent media and journalists are being attacked. So Free Press works on a number of issues. Like I said, we just published a media capitulation index, so I would urge all of you to check out to see how just a handful of billionaires own most of the media in the US. And also the capitulation index is how they have capitulated to the Trump regime. And I call it a regime because, again, right, like, this is authoritarianism. We're in that. We also have been, you know, again, working in the regulatory space at the FCC for a long time. Our FCC chair, Brendan Carr, is doing a lot to harm us. And again, being here at WHYY, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about these frivolous investigations that he's launched into public media stations.
And I want to jump in here because this is the next question that I want to pose to you, and maybe you can kick us off, Vanessa, but I want to shift your focus a little bit because I want to zoom out. And we've seen high-profile figures like Jimmy Kimmel, right, face backlash for a political joke. Journalists like Karen Attiah lose her platform after speaking truth to power, and meanwhile, you know, you just talked about public media lost its funding that had been previously allocated, by the way, by Congress through 2027, that was clawed back. So those in charge of our institutions are also, you know, rewriting or erasing parts of American history. So I want you to sort of talk about how you see all of these attacks, and you're starting to touch on it, I think, Vanessa, shape the broader media narrative, and who do you think at this point really holds the mic?
We're in crisis, y'all. It's like, I don't want to scare you, but I think we need to be scared, right? Like, this is code red, you know, alert. When I was working on my dissertation, I studied, you know, how social movements used radical media to combat authoritarian regimes. And I never imagined we'd be here, but that's exactly what's happening. And a free press, First Amendment rights are one of the first things that authoritarians attack.
Yeah.
We also, even before the Trump administration, spend very, very little money investing in public media compared to other countries. And also the ways in which billionaires, not just owning media companies, but controlling the tech companies and AI platforms, they're all consolidating their power right now. And by doing this, right, it means that we are in a weaker position to resist all these harmful policies. And that's the bottom line, just to connect the audience. If we don't know what's going on, if the media narratives are distorted, if the press doesn't have the freedom to say the truth, then it is much easier for them to consolidate their power and move forward their agenda. They're more than 50% of the way in their agenda for Project 2025. And this impacts all of us, but especially journalists.
Yeah, and I want to get you, Jasmine, to jump in here because we're seeing this. I mean, one of the reasons why Jimmy Kimmel was sort of canceled briefly until the people spoke out was because the company that he works for is trying to buy even more media companies, and they want to raise the threshold and have a larger percentage of control of media outlets. So I want you to talk about a little bit, who do you think holds the mic when you see all of this consolidation?
So I think one of the things we need to be mindful of is we have very little control over the things we don't have control over. But we have been, we believe that we actually have some sort of control in spaces like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. These are not freedom of speech platforms, right? So we don't have any control over the algorithm, right? So I think even here at PhillyCAM for a couple of days, PhillyCAM's channel was taken off of YouTube, right? We don't have control over that. But we do have, when we connect ourselves to organizations like PhillyCAM that has a radio station and still has cable channels and still has studios for the public to come in, that is something we have control over, right? So who has the mic? We still have the mic. The people still have power, right? And so that power is in connecting to organizations that have resources so that you can have a voice and create programming and be uncensored and share it in a space where you actually have some control. Now, it's fine to generate an audience and connect to people online and to share your messaging, but it's important to remember that we have very little control over those spaces. At any moment, they could take your content down from YouTube. At any moment, the work that you're putting in to create really important content could just be hidden or shadow banned, and people that are within your network and people who are interested in hearing your message won't see it, they won't hear it, and you won't even know. So I think that it's important to know that we still have power, right? So we still have the mic here in Philadelphia and other communities that still have community media stations. If there's a local paper, an independent paper, there is still power in that information, and just making sure that we maintain that control and we just don't give it away because YouTube seems like a bigger platform and you can monetize your content, right? So we have to think about, are we creating this because we want to make a few dollars, or are we creating information because we think it's important to people living their best lives and having the information that they need?
And that's so interesting because I've done stories in the past. Yes, we can clap
thank you
for that, Jasmine. It's so interesting you talk about that, Jasmine, because I've done stories about, media makers who grew, accounts on Instagram or YouTube that had, 500,000 followers, which was very valuable, very engaging. They do something, and guess what? Their account is eliminated.
They will take it away in a minute.
They're taken down to zero. All those years of building that, and they couldn't fight it because, like you said, there's no First Amendment right on social media, but there is First Amendment right, on radio, on other different platforms.
And that engagement is powerful. So you've taken the time to develop an audience on this platform, right? Sharing information with people. They take that information from you. Yeah. They trust you. And now what? There's no way for you to know that list of people that was following me.
Yeah.
So you can't just start a new page and get that back. All of that engagement, all of the time and the effort that you spent could be taken away from you in an instant. And there's really nothing you can do about it because you've given away your rights as soon as you sign up to be on these platforms.
Yeah, because the little writing, yeah. And I want to bring you into the conversation.
That has happened to Palestinian journalists documenting war crimes. And so this is the level that they're erasing these accounts and trying to erase evidence.
Yeah.
So back up your stuff, y'all, if you're a content creator.
Back it up. Thank you for that. Michael, I want to bring you in the conversation and talk about this. We've seen, censorship, people losing prominent positions. A lot of folks are going to social media. They're going out on their own. You see people having to become independent media. People who were affiliated with traditional media now are becoming independent media makers. I want you to give your thoughts on how you see this landscape and who really holds the mic.
I think it's a great question when you ask who holds the mic. First of all, I just noticed something here, that I'm the only man on the panel, and I've said the least, which is how it should be. So I hope that other folks who have events copy what we're doing here, and I really mean that, because far too often men come up and just dominate the discussion, and it's just a wonderful thing to see this year. Having said that, let me answer your question directly. 55 years ago, Gil Scott-Heron wrote, "The revolution will not be televised." 55 years later, 2025, I'll reframe that and say the revolution doesn't have to be televised. And that's important. So when the question is posed, who holds the mic, we hold the mic. And what I mean by that is this, and this is a prime example. I'm a part of a group called ATTAC, A-T-A-C, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. It's a very long story, but the short version is this. We fought from 2002 to 2008 for a slavery memorial at 6th and Market. The background is the Liberty Bell Center moved. They went to 6th and Market. Historians found out that was where America's first White House was. They found out that George Washington enslaved 316 black men, women, and children in Virginia, illegally held 9 of them right here in Philadelphia, 6th and Market, America's first White House. So this group of regular grassroots, blue-collar black folks. I love groups like the Urban League and the NAACP and the highfalutin civil rights groups, but we weren't that. We were just regular black folks from the hood who came together, fought the federal government from 2002 until 2010, 8 solid years. And then, December 15 of 2010, there was the grand opening of the first, I repeat, the first slavery memorial of its kind on federal property in the history of the United States. We didn't need CBS. We didn't need NBC. We didn't need ABC. We didn't need any of those. So when I refer to Gil Scott-Heron about the revolution doesn't need to be televised, we can do what we do with our small media outlets. And if we understand that, then we can succeed. It's almost like David versus Goliath, but we got Davids all over the place. We just need to appreciate what we have. Don't look at these 6 corporations who own about 90% of the media and say we can't win. If this little grassroots organization in Philly could have the biggest and the most prominent slavery memorial in the history of the United States, can you imagine what 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 small progressive media outlets can do? So to answer your question, we hold the mic.
I like it. That's very empowering, right? Feel pretty good. So I want to take a moment to talk about journalism because in the past 20 years, we've lost more than 2,500 local newspapers in this country. I mean, and many of the local newspapers that still exist, they're going digital only. They're only producing papers a few times a week, not daily. Philadelphia, we're very lucky because the Philadelphia Inquirer still produces, it's still pretty robust and produces a daily newspaper. And at the same time, we talked about this, algorithms now decide what headlines we see and who gets to be informed. And they actually reward outrage, right? Outrage versus actual information. So, and this shift has led and left entire communities without a trusted voice, and it's created what experts call news deserts. And so I want you to kind of talk about what it means for democracy, and when we're talking about fake news and AI, and also how journalists and independent creators can rebuild trust in an era of misinformation, polarization, and fake news. And Michael, since you're a journalist, you have a show as well, in addition to being an activist, right? An agitator, just sort of like how you view this and how folks in this room can help fill that gap.
Great question. I'm going to go back to this attack organization because we were able to do what we did with small media outlets. It started first with Scoop USA. I don't even know if people know what Scoop is. It started out in 1960 under a great man who passed away recently, Sonny Driver. And it was designed as an entertainment tabloid. But it was designed more specifically so that when black artists came into the Philadelphia region, they'd get paid by these venues what they're supposed to be paid. So it kind of morphed from that into a kind of activist thing. Well, when Attack started in 2002, we couldn't get any media attention except for Scoop USA. They would reach out to us and say, hey, what is Attack doing? They would announce our meetings, and we began to get some traction. From that, we got to WURD, one of only 3 black-owned and operated radio stations in the country, and the only one in Pennsylvania. So now we go from Scoop to WURD, and they put out the story. And then from WURD, we go to the Philadelphia Tribune, founded just about 20 years after the 13th Amendment. So we use these smaller black media outlets to fight the good fight. And we ultimately won. I mean, we won in 2010. Everything was good for 15 years. And now here we are in 2025. And the guy in the White House decides that he's going to try to censor and shut down sites like the 6th and Market Street site. But in the same way we fought the battle from 2002 to 2010 and won, we'll fight the battle again. It's so important for me that if you forget everything else I said, remember that we still have the power. The fight is not over. Don't give in because you constantly hear about how these 6 companies are controlling 90% and you feel like, wow, this is an overwhelming odds. Well, black folks have had more overwhelming odds. Women have had more overwhelming odds. You have gay folks, you have transgender folks, you have brown folks. Everybody in America who is not straight, white, middle class has had to go through hell. And we came out of it. And we can do it again this time.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Can I just add something to that? You mentioned that when you were doing the work, the publications that were supporting that work were the black organizations and the smaller outlets and the smaller papers. That should be our first line of defense, right? So the work that we're doing, we should not have an expectation that any of those corporations and corporate media are going to care. And that is the work of, dominant white supremacist culture, is to delegitimize the work of black and brown people in grassroots efforts, when in fact, those are the people that are gonna care, and that is how we build trust in communities, because those people are gonna trust those publications. So we already know that people are going to have less trust and should have less trust in corporate media while we continue to build and develop those relationships on the ground. So I just wanted to say that I think that needs to be our first effort. Our first line of defense are the people that's on the ground doing the work. And the people that don't come or don't care, just let them not care, right? So we can call them out. It's fine to call them out, but our first line of defense should be the people that are also doing the work on the ground in that space.
And I think that's so profound because we went from Scoop USA to now we're interviewed by USA Today, by Al Jazeera, by the New York Times.
Yeah, and it does, I mean, I will say a lot of traditional media and larger media organizations get their stories from independent media. And a lot of times the seeds are planted and it's a ripple effect. It goes, and then that broadens the narrative. And Vanessa, I know you want to talk about this topic because, how can journalists and independent creators rebuild that trust in this era of misinformation? I want your take.
Yeah, this is really the focus of our work at Free Press on the Future of Journalism project, is to rebuild local news infrastructure. And I want to state that local news, especially newspapers, play a very, very important role in democracy and holding people in power to account. However, there is a long history and legacy of harm perpetuated by these newspapers, and most of them are owned by white men. Even the Philadelphia Inquirer, the LA Times, the Kansas City Star, they've all apologized for their history of racism. So, in some respects, people want to save newspapers, and I think it's important to preserve them. but the trust is broken in many places, right? And for a lot of us, we're not sad to see some of these papers go away, right? You know, for me, I kind of, you know, I curse some of those papers, and we're building new, inclusive, equitable media on those ashes. And so the work that people are doing to start new local newsrooms like the Philadelphia Hall Monitor, like Madre Tierra, like so many that have emerged out of PhillyCAM, is really important because we're not in it as a profit model. We believe journalism is a public good. And when you operate from that value system, you're already seeking to engage, build trust, and be accountable to the public. And those are the types of newsrooms that we're supporting. We're trying to pass legislation in Pennsylvania to fund local journalism. We've done that in New Jersey. And of course, when we passed that bill in New Jersey, who was first to get in line? The same corporate media, right? That's excluded everybody else. And so we've advocated, again, to empower, amplify, and lift up the newsrooms and the journalists and the content creators and even nonprofit organizations who are communicating for them to be first in line to get funding, because they're the ones earning the trust of their local communities. They're putting out useful news and information. They're contributing to positive profiles of diverse communities. And I think as journalists, like, we've been trained, because as I've worked in universities and in these journalism schools, and there's still a lot of training that we don't get in terms of trust building and community engagement. And so I think we need to reframe and think, you know, intrinsically look at ourselves about our thinking. Who are we accountable to, and why are we doing this work?
Thank you very much. We can clap for that, right?
Yes.
So I think you all sort of laid the foundation for this next shift in the conversation, because even as big media consolidates, you know, we see community media stepping up. They're fighting, right? They're keeping local voices alive. We have community radio, we have independent outlets, and these spaces are reminding us that representation is a form of resistance. And so I want to talk about public access media specifically, and Jasmine, we'll start with you on this. Why is it essential to the fight for representation and civic engagement? And also, I want you to give me some examples of, you know, powerful grassroots storytelling that has sort of changed the narrative.
Yeah, that's a great question. So public access media was created as a movement, right? And so I think now we're in a similar space where we need to build community and use this opportunity as a movement again. So it's about representation. It's about freedom of speech. It's about fighting against censorship. It's about creating our own narratives. And we've had several examples in community media across the country where people have told us in other stations that just being in our space has saved their lives. Like, what does it mean when a young person that is feeling unsafe and they belong to the LGBTQIA+ community doesn't have a place to go where they can be themselves, where they can create, and where they can get support, right? And so we've had situations where people within the Black or Indigenous community are able to create content and have resources there. And so it's more than just the resources and the journalism and the access. For me, it's really about the community, and it's about people, and it's about a space that feels good and a space that's welcoming. And we know that that is what saves young people's lives, is when they have a space, right? When they have a third space, or a space where they can go to and connect to other people when they're trying to figure really complicated things out in life. And so it's not just about the journalism piece or the access and creating content. Those things are really important. But one of the things that's harder to quantify, but we know just based on conversations, is the relationship piece. Yeah. And the fact that these are spaces, public access community stations, where people actually build and find community and connections.
Yeah. By the way, personal anecdote, I was the co-host of The Rampage at my high school. And it aired twice a month on public access television in Maryland. And my very first job was logging tape at our local public access station, and I was 16 years old, and I remember being there, and that really, I think, flipped the switch to me really wanting to work in media full time. They produce shows there, and I was able to see that, and I really think that having access to that changed my life as a young person. And so I just want to say, like, it changed my life, you know? And I think having access at a young age can change lives.
Yeah, and those are stories that we hear all the time, and because people, you might not have known at that age that this was something that you were going to be good at, that this was something that you wanted to explore, but just really having that space to do that and give you that confidence and that the background to move on to the next step is something that I think a lot of folks are really proud of. We had a conversation yesterday with several folks in community media in this region, in this area of the country, and one of those stations is really proud of the pipeline that they create from the news. They have a daily news show in Maryland, and they have a wall of fame of all of the journalists that have gone from that stage to work for the CNNs and the ESPNs and, you know, news outlets that are international and other spaces. So we also provide a lot of career development, professional development, and working with young people to help them with career.
And shout out to PhillyCAM, because I know that is a lot of the work that you do here, and I've seen you all in action. So Vanessa, I want to bring you back into the conversation because I know you've worked really hard in this space. And so I want you to talk about public access media and why it's essential to the fight for representation. And then also, I know you have an example. Give me one really good example of this grassroots type journalism that you think has changed the narrative.
There's so many. Yeah, a lot of my work, again, has been helping build low power community radio stations across the country. And you know, thanks to our collective work, because it was so many, we've built over 800 low power FM radio stations in the US since 2013. 55 of those are at public access TV stations, including PhillyCAM. And you know, this week we celebrated our 9-year anniversary. And Gretchen, you know, knows that like a lot of the people from 9 years ago, they're still there doing their thing. You know, it's still a community space. And when I was the station manager previous to my job, you know, at Free Press, one of the things that people would say all the time as guests, it was their first time being interviewed, and especially you know, younger Black and brown people. It's the first time they have been in the media. And listening to so many of those conversations, you realize, wow, you know, we are so diverse. You know, we're not monolithic. Like Latinos are not monolithic. Black people are not monolithic. And I think because the crime narrative is so pervasive in Philadelphia, right? It dominates the news space. It creates these really harmful stereotypes, especially about young Black men. And I think that independent media, community and public access media has given us an opportunity to really change the narrative on that front. You know, I want to just shout out a show called, you know, Looking Forward Reentry Radio, the only show that has formerly incarcerated people. And this show humanizes them in a way that I have never seen before. So that's just one example. And even with all the Latino programming, the Spanish language programming, again, like most people only see Telemundo and Univision, and I don't know if you don't speak Spanish, like a lot of the programming is like really bad. It's really harmful. It's not good. And again, you know, Latinos make up, you know, people from more than 23 countries, you know. A lot of people, they don't know where Puerto Rico is. They literally think it's like in Mexico.
They think it's another country. It's in America.
With another president.
You see the controversy with Bad Bunny. So just being able to represent the diversity of viewpoints among Latinos is really important. And at the Philadelphia Hall Monitor, which is a local newsroom that I co-own with my colleagues, we focus on city government, on covering civic journalism. And we do a survey every year to find out if the content is useful. And more than 90% of the respondents said that they took one of a dozen actions as a result of our programming. right? So that means that they attended a city council meeting and submitted testimony. They registered to vote. They attended a community meeting. They attended a protest. They called their legislators. Like, there's so many. And for me, that's really important because, again, like, changing narratives is great. But if those narratives aren't moving people into action, right, there's something to be desired. And so I really do think that community media is a tool for social justice, right? Because not only are we presenting more positive portrayals of our communities and of ourselves, we're learning, right? Because I've learned so much just from listening to our own programming, but we're also planning, scheming, organizing, and building a movement within that community media space.
That's beautiful. Because you have to empower people, right? Because democracy doesn't work if we don't participate. And so moving people to action is so important. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Michael, got to bring you in because you have courtroom radio. And you talked about attack as well, being under attack right now. I want you to talk about, just the power of public access media, why it is essential to the fight for representation and civic engagement. And then I want you to kind of expound on some of the grassroots effort that you've been involved in.
I love writing my Tribune column called Freedom's Journal. I love hosting my radio show called Radio Courtroom. But the thing I love about hosting my TV courtroom show on PhillyCAM, Public Access Media, is that it allows me to drop the F-bomb anytime I want to. And that is so empowering. True story. But the other thing that's really important is that at PhillyCAM, I was able to bring in guests, like Vanessa was talking about, people who normally don't get interviewed. And I teach a course at Temple called Hip Hop 101. And for me, I try to explain to the students that hip hop is not just getting on the microphone and yelling and screaming with cat, hat, rat, fat rhymes. It's much more profound than that. I explained that hip hop is the child of rhythm and blues, and rhythm and blues is the child of jazz, and jazz is the child of the blues, and the blues are the child of the plantation work song. So we take it all back to the drum and griot, and students understand that. So I actually was able to bring in some quote unquote gangster rappers from the hood who I met at Temple University, because the Temple University program was a Pan-African community program where Temple University opened up the school to people in the hood. And I let people in the hood know that, hey, what do you want to talk about? I started teaching a law-related class, and I said, hey, I know some young rappers who are pretty cool. I brought them into my Hip Hop 101 course, and I realized that they have stories behind that whole gangster persona you see on radio and TV. And I was able to bring them into my TV courtroom show at PhillyCAM, and not only have them rap about important stuff, and they sound like the grandchildren of the last poets, of Gil Scott-Heron, of the Harlem Renaissance. And people are like, wow, they're not just talking about drugs and violence and gangs, they're talking about real revolution. So the fact that PhillyCAM and public access media, it allows or creates a platform for that story to be told, and allows me to drop the F-bomb.
Because sometimes it needs to be dropped. I'll just say that. I wish, okay, I will say I wish we had somebody on our show drop it, and we were like, oop, because we don't have the button. Everybody think, oh, y'all don't have a button, y'all can't hit the boop. No, we don't. But luckily, nobody complained, because sometimes it needs to be dropped, and they're like, somebody had to say it. So I want to shift gears, because we've been covering a lot. We're trying to cover a lot of space today, and right now we're living in an information storm. We have AI that has intensified that storm. We have deep fakes, we have bots, we have synthetic news. There's news sites that look like real news that's fake, okay?
Fine.
Yeah, and it's blurring the line between truth and illusion. And in a world where anyone can create content that looks real, media literacy has become a survival skill. And so how do you teach communities to discern truth from manipulation? And what role do you think schools, journalists, policymakers, and even public access media should play in shaping a more media literate public? And Jasmine, we'll start with you.
I think this is a great space for collaboration and opportunity, because I don't think it exists in a way that we could all benefit from it. So I think that separately, there might be a class here and there about media literacy or a public access station that might do a workshop, but I think this is a really great space for collaboration between educational institutions and community media organizations to create a curriculum that can be taught on different levels, but it's happening so fast, right? And so I think that our propensity to react to a thing really slows us down in terms of being able to collaborate in those larger spaces. So I saw a newscast recently where the whole entire newscast was done in AI. And the person, she's not a person, it's an AI character, does not reveal until the end that this is actually AI. That I know that you believe that I've been in these spaces, and then her image disappeared, and then her image came back so that you can see that this is a generated image. And so these things are happening so fast that we don't have the time to say, okay, how do we connect to this organization? How do we get in spaces where we can work with our seniors, because I think that they are vulnerable to some of the scams and the things that are happening, work with young people, and I think this is a good space for opportunity, right? So as it presents itself for us to collaborate with education, with universities, with community media, with journalisms to create some sort of platforms and toolkits, but it can't be that traditional toolkit where there's a lot of documents, right? A lot of pages that we send out to people.
Nobody reads the pages.
Nobody reads the pages, and so sometimes we put a lot of effort into the white papers and into the research, and who's really going to be able to benefit from that. So we have to also become the experts in the space, because that is how people are going to receive the information. So I think it's a really good opportunity for collaboration, but I don't know that it's currently there, and if we have the resources to commit to it, right? Because what happens is within a community media center, you have people that are wearing several hats, you have people that are teaching, you have people that are in production, you have people that are doing journalism. So now, how do we create the space for someone to become an expert in AI and then be able to create curriculum, do the outreach to collaborate with institutions, so that we have a resource issue that prevents us from being able to spend the time and energy that we need to be able to support this work. And it's just happening so fast, but that's also the intent of it.
Yeah.
Right? The intent of it is to just have our heads constantly spinning where we don't know what's real and we just don't trust anything.
And I'm really nervous because the 2026 election is coming up. We've already seen the impact of deepfakes on elections, and the videos, the audio, all of this is getting better and better and better. And so, Vanessa, Michael, jump in, please. Your thoughts on whose responsibility it is. Should it be policymakers? Should it be journalists? Should it be public access? Who should be responsible for trying to help people not be confused? Because even some of us, and we're pretty skilled, get confused.
I have fallen for AI. I'm not gonna lie. We have to be honest about it. It is that convincing. It's all of our responsibility, and unfortunately, a lot of the disinfo and AI is coming from our president, and other legislators and people in power, and that's really scary, right? Again, we're in uncharted territory. Last year, Free Press had a whole initiative called Democracy Is, and we offered a bunch of trainings for journalists and newsrooms on this very issue, how to combat disinformation around elections, and how to spot AI and deep fakes. And we really encouraged newsrooms to pass along the information to the public, right? Because we think local newsrooms have a responsibility, but also play a key role in educating the public about these things. So on the Philadelphia Hall Monitor, every election time, I also, search the internet and try to identify memes and disinfo, and try to clarify what's going on. The Latino media, we're in a group chat, right? Because there's a lot of disinfo around ICE and ICE raids. And it is very difficult, because that disinfo is meant to scare people, right? There's a lot of fear. And on the one hand, we want to inform people, right? If ICE is at a location and we want to keep people safe and give them all the information, but it can be very hard, right? And you don't want to rush to share the information if it's not real, and we've been burned a few times. And so that collaboration that you're talking about, it's it's key, because that whole group of Latino media working together to try to call around and figure out, is this real, is this not real? We come across all sorts of things. So having that that group that we can discuss it together is super helpful. But I DM people on the regular, like, hey sis, that is AI, or that's not real. Try not to shame people, because we all
don't
fall
do it
for
publicly. So I do the DM as well.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I fact checked this, actually not true. And the other thing that I do regularly is publish a list of trusted news sources, right? I continuously share, hey, follow these sources. They're really, really good. Or follow these journalists, or these content creators are legit. But you got to be careful with the content creators too, because they're not held to the same standard as journalists in newsrooms. So I've had to creep in some of their DMs too, because I get upset when they're sharing disinfo. But it's all of our responsibility. We have to work together. And certainly, if I've been checked a couple times, like, oh, that's not actually a great source, especially if it's international. You're like, oh, okay, well, I don't really know a lot about Filipino news sources, right? So it's like, we have to hold each other responsible and teach each other.
Yeah, for sure. Michael, do you have anything to add to this?
As a man, I have to resist the knee-jerk reaction of mansplaining. So I'll just say what Vanessa said.
Yeah. And I have to say, there are whole fact check organizations. I know the Associated Press had to create a whole site dedicated to the fake news of the week. They were like, these are stories that were not real stories. And I mean, that's how, these conspiracies and all these fake news, but I mean, they had to dedicate people to dispelling myths. University of Pennsylvania had a fact checker, and so it's getting very serious, and it's hard to catch all the lies, because once it's a lie out there, it's hard to put it back in the bottle.
But even though that resource exists, the common person that is interacting on social media is not going to know that, oh, I saw a thing, I'm going to go to the Associated Press, they have a tool that I can paste this in.
Snopes, yeah.
So, like, it's, even though, like, I appreciate the fact that people are creating these resources so that we can do our due diligence, but the truth is most people won't, and they won't know. So we need something in place where people must, right, identify when these images or when these videos are, AI or AI supported. It's going to take a long time, just like with food ingredients, right? And so that was a huge fight on what, the packaging information in terms of calories and fat and all of the stuff that corporations did not want printed.
And there are
on
efforts right now.
Right.
I know in Pennsylvania, there was a lawmaker on a panel I was on last week that was talking about efforts to label AI. If AI was included in certain media, you have to have an AI label, or if AI was used to help in generating. But the question is, where's the line? If you use it as an editor, you wrote the article and then you use Grammarly, do you have to disclose that? And so, but you should have to disclose if this is an AI generated video. So we want to sort of move in that direction. So we're at a crossroads politically, socially, and technologically between censorship, chaos, corporate media, community power. And our choices right now will determine what kind of democracy we leave behind for the next generation. And I want to talk about this crossroads because we see traditional media sort of contracting, right? We see the growth of news influencers, media influencers, independent media. And so how do you see this moment as a crossroads for free expression? And sort of like, what do you think we as a community of media makers need to do to reclaim the idea that media is a public good, not a private commodity? So I want you to kind of like take a look. I know it's a big question. But I want it because we are at a crossroads. If you could try to encapsulate.
Yeah, at Free Press, part of my job is organizing journalists, and they're a tough crew to organize because
herding cats.
But also there's this, again, it's like a Western capitalist media value that journalists are apolitical or objective and neutral, and a lot of newsrooms don't allow people to actually go to protests or participate in any of those things. So it's really hard to get them to reframe that and think more like Michael Court over here, who proudly says, "I'm an activist and a journalist and an agitator." But I remind people, we fight for contracts, fair wages. We've always organized around better working conditions. And we also, fight for better laws to get access to information and public records and shield laws. So journalists have been fighting for their rights. But I think we're at a moment in time where our First Amendment rights are so fragile. And I don't think people realize how fragile they are. I think again, I'm going to go back to my Latino comrades, right? Like, talk to people in Venezuela, talk to people in Cuba, talk to people in the Philippines who have more recently experienced their loss of rights, who have been arrested, who have been targeted. And I'm really learning from them about what to do, what is it like to live under those conditions, because they've already lived that life. A lot of them are here in this country now. Working in Philadelphia because they've been chased away by the cartels and their lives threatened for doing journalism. And that is a very real reality for us if we don't change the way that we think and advocate for ourselves. We're the front line of defense, right? We should be the keepers of the First Amendment and our free speech rights. And so I think it's really important that we get organized, right? And we have a plan of action. And that's why we have a media power collaborative at Free Press that you can join if you want to get organized. But there's many more journalism coalitions through the Society of Professional Journalists, PABJ, et cetera.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, journalists have to become activists for their own platforms and for their own work. And Michael, I know you're an activist, you're a lawyer out here. And so, how do you see this moment as a crossroads? Because I think, and I want to say this, because I do think that we take free press for granted. This is something that, we're like, oh no, we are free. This is free, First Amendment, everybody throw it out. I can say whatever I want. People love that in America. It's like a bedrock principle. But we've never really seen the alternative, like what it really looks like if the First Amendment doesn't exist. And so we are at this crossroads. How do you see this moment, Michael?
I would love for all journalists to be activists, but you don't have to be. I would love for all journalists to be agitators, but you don't have to be. But what you have to do is to stop this both sides BS. Don't be so damn objective. The question about slavery, pro or con, what the hell? Question about apartheid, pro or con. The question about Nazism, pro or con, no. There is no pro or con, it's only one thing. So it's important upon journalists to make that clear. When I see people debating non-debatable issues, even some of my progressive allies, I'm like, just shut down that conversation, because there are no both sides. And the final thing, when I talk to folks, I always try to quote something from Gil Scott-Heron or James Baldwin, the last poet, so I'll go back to Gil Scott-Heron. He said that simply because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything. So what we ought to do is to find groups, for example, like the ACLU, join that. Some progressive media groups, join that. Just latch on to something and do the right thing, but mostly stop with the both sides nonsense.
Okay. Well, one thing Michael has is a point of view, and I love it. I love it. I love it. Jasmine, do you have anything to add? Like, how do you view this moment?
I think that we need to look at how the shift that we want to happen in the country and to try to have a very specific strategy on how to get there.
Yeah.
So many years ago, I want to say over 40 years ago, Congress enacted a Telecommunications Act that allowed for funding for communities to have access to resources to be able to create content and provide information to those communities. that act is over 40 years old, right? So we are way overdue for legislation that supports the work of local journalists in communication efforts and protecting that work. So that has to be, policy has to be a piece of this strategy too. So I think the policy piece, the grassroots efforts, I think the work that Vanessa is doing within a group me, right, within a chat, is really important, right? Because that's how you keep and maintain trust. If you're connecting to people, they know that it's her. They don't have to worry about, was this email drafted by somebody else? Like, they have a trust and understanding that this is somebody that I know. So I think that if we identify what is the shift, what do we want to see 40 years from now, and how do we get there? And a piece of that has to be policy work, right? It has to be having conversations with our representatives and legislators to say, this is what's happening to your constituents. They're not able to receive information about you, about the work that you're doing in your community, and we need some support and we need some resources to protect this work for the future. So the grassroots piece is really important, but we also need really strong strategies within our communities when it comes to policy work.
Yeah, and I have to say, I teach journalism law and ethics, and one of the issues is, how to protect media makers, because we've had shield laws, but that is state by state. There is no national shield law, and they've had the Press Act sort of lingering around, and there was some momentum a couple of years ago, but it's kind of fallen flat, and you wouldn't believe the subpoenas that journalists get from federal authorities to reveal sources, to come testify, to provide information. And so as people become independent media makers telling stories, you too could be subject to that. And so I told all of you I was gonna ask you this question because, I work for WHYY. It's, we're a pretty large organization, we're a nonprofit, but we do have lawyers who work here. And as more and more people become independent media makers, they're monetizing their work, they're putting out stories, and we have an administration that is willing to weaponize the DOJ to come after individuals who use their right to speak truth to power. Like, what should people be doing to protect themselves? And I want you to give some advice here. Because they may not have lawyers lawyered up. They can't afford that, right? Should they get insurance? Because there is, you can get defamation insurance or whatever insurance. They provide you, a lawyer up to a certain amount. Like, what should people be doing, especially as the media becomes a business for them and they could find themselves dealing with liability issues? And whoever wants to jump right in.
I agree with Jasmine. We need a strategy for that too, right? Like, every newsroom, every content creator needs to kind of take time to plan. What if ICE shows up at my door? What if FBI shows up at my door? Attorney will tell you, don't talk to them.
Don't say anything.
Right, the lawyer's here to tell you, don't say anything. But you need to kind of map that out, that scenario out in your head. Like, I think people need to do some sort of like disaster scenario planning, just to kind of get a sense of what information they need. A contact list of people that other people need. And unfortunately, my mom has a list to all the free press attorneys, and and this is what to do if I get detained. I have a button on my cell phone that sends a message to 3 people that says, I have been detained by ICE. Please call my free press attorneys and the Reporters Committee hotline. That's just the reality that we're in right now. So you have to map that out for what that looks like for yourself and whatever role that you're in. If you're someone that has a community space, think through these things. And there's a ton of resources online. So Free Press has a whole resource library. We actually have a toolkit for organizing against authoritarianism. We have protest guides in English and Spanish, pero necesitamos más recursos en español, y estoy trabajando en eso. So, we need more resources in Spanish, and I'm working on that with Leticia and Aria. But yeah, start educating yourself and make a list of the organizations, as Michael mentioned, that you need to be affiliated with, in contact with. It's super important. And lastly, I just want to say one last thing. I just want to clarify something, because I'm Puerto Rican, and it's important to note Puerto Rico had a gag law for many years, up into the 1950s, where people were literally disappeared, imprisoned and even killed for organizing around independence. And my grandparents remember this. This is the United States. So I know people can't imagine a scenario where that would happen. That actually has happened, in Puerto Rico. And, as someone who advocates, for many different things, including Puerto Rican sovereignty, again, we have to remember that history. So learning our history is really important form of self-defense as well.
Thank you. And Jasmine, Michael, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, what people should do to just sort of arm themselves with information just in case. And by the way, I was an intellectual property attorney for years before becoming a journalist. People got to talk about copyright. They got to talk about trademark. As you make money, you can't always take images from other people and then make money off of that, because you could get yourself in some trouble. So we got to start, as business owners, people have to start thinking in a different way, because a lot of people are creating media businesses.
The folks that are on the ground doing the work, figuring out how to be content creators and monetize their content, most of them don't have the resources to hire an IP attorney, to have their own independent insurance and, other resources where they could get that information. So my advice would be to connect to an organization. Michael mentioned the ACLU. Vanessa's doing work within several other organizations. There is power within that connection, right? So that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, this has happened to me. Can you make a recommendation of an attorney that I need to see? And so, or that I could see. The access that we have to our phones and building our individual networks makes some people believe that we can do this work alone. Right? So I can be a filmmaker. I have a phone. I can record video. I can edit my video. But building and connecting to community has so much power, because now you can reach out to people and have conversations and to attempt to get the support you need. So I think that in this space, the last thing that you want to be is separated and to be alone, trying to do this work and trying to figure out how to do anything on your own. So I would say connect to an organization that has a network, an organization that does training, that has access to resources, that has events where you can meet people, because in that space you can start to develop a network that you're going to eventually need.
In case you got to break the glass, Michael.
3 things very quickly. 1, we already discussed, join the ACLU. 2, join an even more progressive, dare I say, radical group called the National Lawyers Guild. And 3, anytime you say or write something that might even seem to be provocative, always preface it and end it with, in my opinion.
Yeah, because opinions are protected, and opinions are treated differently than if you present something as a verified fact. And so I want to open up the floor to questions from our audience. Yes.
Okay, hi. I can speak loudly. I have a loud voice. Here we go. Oh, awesome.
It's being recorded, so the mic helps.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Hello, thank you guys so much for being here. You have lit a fire in my belly, and that's not just the coffee talking. I am a queer comedian who is in the mindset of Stephen Colbert, Rebels and Sweaters, where comedy should be intellectual and speak truth to power. But I feel like I'm in a world of Joe Rogan wannabes where ignorance is being celebrated, and it's very frustrating. And I just want to open the floor and ask a question of how can one use humor and comedy as a tool for social change, if you guys have any opinions on that.
I think the power of your personal story and your personal journey speaks volumes, right? And so sometimes that's hard to see in real time. But 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when we're having conversations and people want to know, well, what did you do? Right? So these things were happening on a national level, and people were being stripped of their rights, and people were being snatched off the streets. What exactly did you do to combat that? Right? So to be able to say that in a space where we had the Joe Rogans and, the podcaster wannabes, like, I stood on what I believed, I shared my story, and I wanted to be an inspiration for people like me. So I think just remembering that
Your story is valid, your perspective is valid, and not to change that in a space when you feel uncomfortable, because those times are going to happen. But I think that in the future, you're going to be able to say, no, I stood 10 toes down and I told this joke. I knew it was controversial, right? But it was important to me, and so I shared my story.
I think the meme wars are real, right? Like, make more memes. The Daily Show, the Colbert Report, John Oliver have been really effective because they employ satire. And satire has been used for centuries, right? To make fun of the people in power, to make the common person understand. People are not reading the New York Times or the Washington Post, so we need you to explain how ridiculous these things are, and there's endless fodder for that, right? And so just take every opportunity, right, to make people laugh. And also, joy is the thing that keeps us going. We cannot bring doom and gloom every day and think people are going to sustain valid or viable resistance. We need joy. We need art. We need music. We need people like you to keep us going and to make us laugh, because that is what will sustain us into doing this work. This is a lifelong struggle, hate to tell you guys. And so just keep doing that. I know there's a lot of haters. I personally have experienced online trolling from these people. It's really shitty, but look to your comrades, look to people for support, because there are people that love you and believe in you, and just try to block those people and tune them out.
And by the way, satire is protected by the First Amendment. I just want to let you know that your work you do is protected. Go ahead.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Ariane Bracho. Soy de Madre Tierra Philly, un programa que se transmite a través de PhillyCAM. Y yo quiero decirles algo. Venezuela actualmente tiene mucho más de 50 periodistas presos por decir la verdad. Y yo siento que no se está viendo el problema que está ocurriendo aquí con el horror que debería verse. Creo que estamos pensando como, Estados Unidos ha sido un país de democracia, no vamos a caer en esto, y nosotros en Venezuela también pensábamos lo mismo.
So, hi, my name is Ariane Bracho. I work with Madre Tierra Philly, which is supported by PhillyCAM. I want to say that in Venezuela, there's over 50 journalists that are imprisoned right now. And I see that in the United States, people don't really understand how serious this problem is. People think that America is a democratic country and that this couldn't happen here.
Así que creo que estos espacios son súper importantes para que lo conversemos. Además lo veamos con el miedo. Tenemos que tener miedo, porque eso nos va a ayudar a protegernos. Eso va a ser un mecanismo de protección. Quiero agradecer el espacio y también quiero decir que efectivamente tenemos que educar a la comunidad. Tenemos que pensar que sí, tenemos nosotros la responsabilidad de informar.
So, first of all, I want to thank you all for having this space so we can talk about these things. I agree that fear is very important because it's a way that we protect ourselves, and we have to educate the community. We have to educate the community about what is happening.
Y creo que de alguna manera los periodistas y los que hacemos medios, los que estamos en el ojo público, hemos tenido de alguna manera un privilegio. Pero es que en este momento tan grave que está ocurriendo en Estados Unidos, debemos contar con la comunidad, una comunidad formada e informada para que podamos multiplicar este discurso de paz, de aceptación y de que queremos seguir siendo, además, no solamente un país de democracia al que agradezco hayan abierto la puerta para recibirme después del horror que vivimos en Venezuela, sino un país que quiere ser el mejor país del mundo.
¿La primera cosa fue?
Quiero dar las gracias.
So I want to thank this country for receiving me, for having me here.
Y que tenemos que educar a la comunidad.
And we have to educate the community.
Que nosotros hemos tenido el privilegio
because we as journalists, as reporters, have had the privilege of being able to inform people. But we have to continue informing the community because they are the ones that are in these spaces. So that's it.
Gracias, Ariane.
Yes, thank you so much. Any final question?
I was just hoping we were going to get a 2 or 3 minute comedy set before we wrap things up here.
All right, I saw, all right, oh.
Hi. So some people that I'm in an organization with, we have been talking about making.
I'm sorry, can you speak louder because I can't hear you?
We can't hear you.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. So I have a group of people who we want to start an independent media organization. We've so far thought about doing it on WordPress or magazine. And I was thinking when you guys were talking about places that you don't have free speech on it, is that, my question was what is the best way to start an independent media organization? Would it be more towards something like PhillyCAM, or would making our own website or a zine be what you could do? But yeah, I don't know.
So I guess the question is, what would you do if you wanted to start an independent media organization?
Yeah.
This is the question we get all the time at PhillyCAM. And also from people across the country who wanting to start local newsrooms. I think the first thing is to determine who is your audience, right? Because there's a lot of training programs and classes, but they might not meet your needs to serve that particular community, right? So who is your target audience and how do you plan on reaching them? And I say this because if you're trying to reach older people, it's probably going to be a different medium than reaching people from the ages of 14 to 21, right? And also the socioeconomic level, their literacy level, right? There's, I like radio because it's accessible to everybody, but I also recognize not a lot of people who are younger listen to radios, right? So you have to really figure out who that target audience is. And once you figure out the medium, and if it is a broadcast medium, then PhillyCAM is a great place to start. But there's many different training programs available. The LenFest Institute for Journalism has some great resources and has funded many of us and incubated our projects as well. And then there's a whole bunch of workshops here today. I think meeting people is a really big part of it, right? And understanding, okay, say I want to do a news site and do it on WordPress, and I want to reach people 18 to 35. Look for other people doing that work. To talk to them and figure out what's worked for them and what hasn't worked for them. And don't limit yourself to this area. Look for people in other parts of the country. DM them. Look for people on LinkedIn as well. There is the organization called Lion and the Tiny News Collective. And they're really great in helping seed independent media projects.
I would also add that it's important to have an idea of how you plan on sustaining the work after you've created something. So you've identified your target audience, you've created the platform. How do you plan on sustaining this work, and how will this space have some longevity, right? Are you going to be collaborating with other journalists? If you're using a site, are you going to be looking for sponsors to help, pay the people and pay the reporters? Are you looking at a membership structure? Is it just free information for folks? So we've seen a lot of, businesses and folks with really great ideas get off the ground. And then, a couple of years in or a couple of months in, they're really they're struggling and trying to figure out how to sustain those efforts. So I would say if you're at the starting point, that thinking about how are we going to sustain this and how is this going to exist 5 years from today, and start to plan from there.
But you're in the right place today to learn more.
Yeah. We can do 2 more questions.
Okay, 2 more questions.
Was there one over here? Was there a question over here? Yeah.
Thank you so much for the panel. And I just wanted to say that I feel like the ghost of the 90s is really in these conversations about where we are now. The 1996 Telecommunication Act, absolutely, but also the attack on labor in newspaper rooms in the mid-90s. And we were, so that first line of defense that we were talking about earlier got eviscerated in the 90s, which set us up for, 9/11 and not being prepared. And so that we have this point of view where I agree, I never want to lose my anger towards the daily papers that sold us the wars. I never want to forget. And I also want to remember those in political power that eviscerated us or were at war with us in the 90s. And I really want to reflect in my own life, the old Who song, "Don't Get Fooled Again," as we come up against another election. I really want to hear leaders and politicians really speak to the where we want to go, the policy, but really speak to something that really goes back to something older. We have to make something older, a vision that was older, an independent vision that was older. We have to make it new again. And we can't just go back to some people's version of the 90s, because it wasn't so great, and I was there. And the great stuff got taken away, and at gunpoint in some cases, pirate radio stations, the police coming in, taking people's stuff. I remember that. And that's why, PhillyCAM is so important, because it's a memory of that 90s moment of taking back power. So I'm sorry that's not a question, but I just wanted to say I feel that constructive anger in some of this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to clarify for people that don't know that the 1996 Telecommunication Act, signed by a Democrat, President Bill Clinton, by the way, is what increased the media ownership caps. And that is what caused a very rapid media consolidation. So before, where there were thousands of independently owned newspapers, radio stations, TV stations, publishing houses, there were restrictions that would limit how much any one company could own in the market. And then when those caps were raised, big media companies then bought up a lot of the Black media, a lot of women-owned media, independent media across the country, and that's how they became the powerful networks that they are today. And what's happening now with our current FCC and Brendan Carr is that they're trying to get rid of any caps at all. And so where we thought the 1996 Telecommunications Act was bad, what's next is horrific. So we have to really fight to stop that policy from moving forward. So definitely follow Free Press if you're concerned about that.
And last question, yes.
Good morning, and thank you guys so much for all the information you guys have been sharing with us. My name is Brenda Hernandez. I'm a community organizer here in Philadelphia. I'm here just to kind of learn how media overall works with communities. You guys touch base about fear and also how to share right information with communities, but also how to build the audience that you guys connect with. My question is, with the community that you organize with, right, and share the same fear, how you share the same strength to lift the voices that are not being heard, and what advices for new people, new media, will you guys share with them to continue to build that connection and not lose kind of like, we hear your story, that's it. Now move on to the next one, right? How do you continue to have that relationship so in the future, they don't lose kind of like that relationship and also don't feel like they left out?
So within my own organization at Montgomery Community Media in Maryland, we have a reporter that created a space called Hola Montgomery. All of the reporting she does is in Spanish. She has a podcast in Spanish. And so what we've had to do as the leaders of the organization is take a step back and make sure we're inviting people from that space to the table so they can create their own thing, right? So all of the content is in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish. I'm not looking for interpretation. You don't have to run everything by me, right? So they have the opportunity to create their own space, and I have to understand that as the CEO of that organization, that this is a community that operates differently from the Black community, right? So in terms of, we can't just send a camera and send a camera crew to a community meeting. If we don't have relationships in that community, the people will shut down. They will act like we are not even there. So these reporters have built and developed their own relationships. They have their own style. They make sure that they're including those voices. And so we have to make sure that we're not, because we have power and we have access, that we're not becoming the oppressors, right? That we're not saying, well, you got to run everything by me and you have to do, like, we have to give people the space, and we have to trust that they can build and develop the relationships and develop the programs that are beneficial to that community. Now, that's going to look very different with an Ethiopian community in Montgomery County, right? And so there we have to do the same thing. We have to invite people that have relationships and let them build and create a program, and we can just support and provide the resources, but really take a step back and let them do their thing.
I think it's important to show up too. I want to shout out Leticia and Ariane because we're always going out. I always see them. It's like, oh, you're here again. And at least in our community, among Latinos, we're very family and community oriented. And also there is a real distrust of media. And so I think people need to meet you in person. They need to spend time with you. We need to eat together. We need to have fun together. You know, I'm not just a journalist, like we're friends, you know? And the other thing that's really important is I don't publish 90% of the things that I work on, right? We are researchers, we are investigators, we are social workers in some cases. We're always finding information for our community to help them. That's a skill that we have. We don't publish that stuff. That's not doing that for views and likes. We're doing that because we have the education and we have contacts, right? So we call around, hey, somebody's trying to find information about this. We also share sources. And so there's a very collaborative nature to the work that we do that I find that's very different sometimes from the English-speaking media. And I think that that's what builds trust in the community. Like you see people out there constantly and you see, oh, they're actually working together. Y'all know each other. Like, who are these people? And that you're willing to perform a service not to profit off them or to get audience views and likes, but because you actually want to help them and you care. I think those are the ways that you build trust and visibility with our Latino community especially. And lastly, I will say that we can't just show doom and gloom all the time. We have to tell stories where we win, right? Yeah. Because winning is a part of strategy, right? And we have to motivate people by the times when we work together, when we fight, and when we win. That has to be part of our way to build trust and connect with people as well, because they always say the media only shows up when there's a homicide, when there's an ICE raid. Yeah. They don't show up when we win, when we're doing good in the community. And so we have to make sure that we amplify, the diversity in the Latino community, and to not always show like the model minority, but just regular people. Yeah, people doing regular stuff. So that's what I would advise to you.
And I just want to say consistency. I mean, I was a reporter for over 10 years, and I spent a lot of weekends at fish fries in basements, at community block parties, and doing stories that, and a lot of times they seem small, but they were really a big deal to that community. And I think if you just consistently show up, and it's not like a job, it's just part of your life. Oh, I'm gonna pop over to this at the rec center. And then people consistently see you, even if they don't speak to you, they'll remember that you were there. And then when something big happens, you'll be the face that they're willing to talk to. And I just want to say thank you. Before I hand it back over to you, Gretchen, I want to say thank you to our incredible panelists, Jasmine White, Michael Cord, and Vanessa Maria Graber, for your passion, your wisdom, and the work that you do every single day. I'm Cherry Gregg. It was an honor to moderate this plenary.
This was exactly what I was hoping for, so thank you so much. I mean, this was really to kind of like lay the table and be like, this is the the work that we need to do, and we need to do it together. And they really hit all the notes that I thought they would. So we videotaped it, and we have audio, so we will be showing it again or putting it out as a podcast. So we'll let you all know so you can tell your friends. Now we're going to begin the transition over to PhillyCAM, where we have an afternoon full of things, as well as lunch. But Michael, I wanted you to just kind of offer that invitation again and just let folks know where we're walking and what you're going to be doing. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for reminding me. I touched on during my presentation what happened at 6th and Market. And we'd like to have you, as many of you who might be interested in joining us at 6th and Market, on the corner of 6th and Market. That's the President's House. That's the official name, but we call it the President's House / Slavery Memorial. And that site is the result of activism from the community. It's where America's first White House stood. It's where George Washington enslaved black people. And it's where the guy in the White House is attempting to shut down. So any day now, that site could be shut down. We have lawyers ready to file and seek injunctions, but we have to wait until the guy in the White House pulls the trigger. He had a September 17 deadline that, because the masses came together and offered resistance, that September 17 deadline came and went. But it could be tomorrow. It could be next week. So we're hoping that you can join us today for a quick tour of the site. I'm not sure what time, but I'll be there all day long.
Oh no, we're just gonna walk now.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
That's perfect.
and then
Perfect.
they can go, and then you all can go get lunch. That's
That's
does
even
that sound
better.
Good? Okay, awesome. Well, I guess that's all I have. So
Can we
much.
give it up for our host, Cherry
Yes,
Gregg?
totally. Yes,
Did a great job
Beautiful.
of getting us long-winded people together. So thank you.
And hopefully you all will be joining us down at PhillyCAM. And again, thanks to our hosts here at WHYY and the tech folks that are in the booth. So we're just recognizing them. So anyway, great way to start. Thank you, everyone.